Harry, welcome to Culpa. Really great to have you here. It's been a while. Haven't seen you, of course, since the DNC. But I want to jump. There's so much to talk about, and I want to just jump right into it. So I want to ask you this. With Trump set to be sworn in basically 50 days, his cabinet and his administration picks are being closely scrutinized. What's funny is I actually know many of them personally for like over 2 decades. My question to you, which of these appointments concerns you the most and why?
That's a really good question. And it's kind of hard to pin down because there are so many terrible ones. I think that I would have said, oh, this is so hard. I'm like in my mind between like people that Trump has actually appointed, kind of disregarding whether they actually get confirmed or not. I'd say it's has to be like Matt Gaetz, Pete Hegseth, or Tulsi Gabbard. Matt Gaetz just because of the allegations against him,
Except he's already out.
So but he's already out. So we don't have to think about him at least. But in terms of the last two people, Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard, Hegseth, because, he's a Fox News host who's now going to be possibly running the Department of Defense. He's never run an organization bigger than a small nonprofit. And now we expect him to run the biggest military in the world. I'm not so confident. And Tulsi Gabbard, because she has some very strange connections to foreign countries, in 2017, going behind the official channels to go meet Assad. And obviously she was placed on a temporary TSA list. So she had extra screening before her flights because of her connections to foreign countries. That's all very concerning to me. That's kind of what I'm thinking about right now.
But there's so many others that are there as well. Kristi Noem. I mean, they are unusual picks to say the absolute least. It kind of just brings up like, not only are we trying to figure out what these picks are supposed to represent, but his policies as well, right? That will go behind each of these individuals, because Trump's proposed policies for the second term include very extreme measures on both, as an example, immigration and education. I have a problem with Tom Homan, to be very honest with you. I find that he's incredibly extreme, especially on this concept of immigration. What do you think the immediate impact is going to be on younger Americans as we now start diving into and having to deal with both immigration and education with somebody like Linda McMahon at the helm?
Yeah, well, Linda McMahon starting there is going to make the Department of Education significantly worse. Once again, somebody I think that doesn't have the qualifications to be leading such an important department. And, Trump and his buddies have been talking about getting rid of the Department of Education as a whole. So plenty of students, of people who need FAFSA and things like that, some aid to go to school, are going to suffer almost day one if Trump and his buddies go through with what they're saying about. But then when it comes to immigration and what Trump's been talking about there, on day one, his tariffs, his 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico, his 10% additional tariff on China is going that those three countries account for 46% of what the United States imports. So 50% of what we buy at the grocery store or wherever you go is going to become more expensive. That's going to dramatically hit younger Americans who don't have the financial status as maybe older Americans do, who have been working for some time. We're talking about young people in college, people just about to enter college are going to have their prices go up. On a variety of things, whether they're buying a car, whether they're buying appliances, whether they're just going to the grocery store and getting fruits and vegetables, it's all going to become more expensive. So Trump on day one is promising to make our lives worse. And that's concerning to me.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that because you are obviously young in your, 22? 22. And obviously you have your pulse on your age group. I still don't understand how Trump ended up doing better amongst your age group than was expected. But since we're talking about education for a second, when I start listening to some of the things that I'm hearing from some of the extremists, the only thing I can think of is that famous quote in the Billy Madison movie, right, with Adam Sandler. What you've just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. I mean, that's the only thing that comes to mind when I hear about things like, by reading this book, your child will become gay. By reading this book, that it's going to now ultimately make them want to be transgender. And the concept of doing away, like with whether it's going to be book banning or doing away with the entire Department of Education. I don't understand that whole concept, considering you just appointed or you just nominated Linda McMahon to be the Secretary of Education. Why are you appointing anybody if the goal is to dismantle it? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe the overall transition process so far with Trump's team. None of it just makes any sense. I think you said it well earlier that a lot of these are just untraditional picks, right? These are picks that we wouldn't expect. Someone like, as you mentioned, Kristi Noem, like RFK Jr. leading our health agencies. It just doesn't make sense. These people are not qualified. They don't know what they're doing, and they're running some of the most important agencies, not only in the United States, but in the world. It just doesn't make sense. There's no rhyme or reason here. And I think that you and many others were adequately warning people about this beforehand, that these these agencies and people in his administration would not be people who are dedicated to just making the country better, who are public servants, who are interested in that future. They're just buddies to Trump. The only qualification right now of all the people we're talking about is just, are you going to be loyal to Trump or not? And if you're not, no matter how much experience you have, you're out. If you are, then come on in. You're welcome. And they're not even doing the FBI background checks, as you've spoken about before. So you're right. It's nonsensical.
Yeah. I will turn around and say this. Can you imagine if hypothetically, I want to just throw a quick hypothetical at you. Imagine, because we all acknowledge that Washington is broken, and Washington has been broken for a long time. That's what Trump ran on. He ran on the dysfunction of DC. He ran on their inability to get shit done that betters our lives. And how you know that to be true as per Trump and the campaign? Well, look at the price of your gasoline and your groceries, right? Look at what's wrong with this. You have now transgender bathrooms and you have transgender sports. It's why that one woman who was originally a male, born a male, won in the swimming competition. So they take the one issue and they make it into the entire, mountain. But they go on and they have all of these very fringy sort of things. Imagine if the guy figured it out. Imagine if by bringing in these non-traditional picks, that somehow or another they actually accomplish things that could not be accomplished because of the stalling and because of the gamesmanship and partisanship that goes on in DC. Imagine if by doing the things like an RFK, imagine if somehow getting rid of vaccinations ends up becoming some positive. I don't see how, but imagine if it is. Imagine if putting in somebody like Pete Hegseth, right, for the Department of Defense. Imagine if all of a sudden he's so untraditional that it actually works out and creates world peace. Imagine if we can go on Tulsi Gabbard, right, with national security. Imagine if having her there ends up creating some sort of a global stability and we no longer have X, Y, and Z issues. Could you imagine that Donald will now have not only just created the 1,000,000,000 to 1 odds of being able to escape all of his personal accountability, the legal, but he will have fundamentally changed how politics is not just viewed in America, but how for the rest of eternity it's handled. Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
something?
Now, I would put that in the same ballpark as like the odds of that being winning the lottery. I put that in kind of the same arena. But look, if that could happen, if everything could be more efficient, everything could be fixed, that would be great. I think that you, I, and everybody are hoping for the success of the United States, and that comes with the success of the president. So if Trump can do things that are good, we'll all be better for it. Now, will that happen? As you mentioned, incredibly unlikely. Incredibly unlikely that Donald Trump actually figures it out or does something good. But I'm not rooting against the country just because Trump is president. So if what you says happens, maybe you and I can celebrate that.
So it's funny that you say that, because on my other show with Ben Meiselas, right, from
Yeah,
MeidasTouch, we have a show called Political Beatdown. And I turned around and I said, I have the utmost of respect for the office of the presidency. I think the office of the presidency should be paramount. In fact, I'm hopeful, not optimistic, but I'm hopeful that Trump will be successful in his presidency. Now, when I say the success, I want to couch that by saying not doing things that are partisan for MAGA only, but things that benefit all Americans. I would be elated, because if Trump is successful in his presidency, that means America is successful, which means all of us are successful. And what sort of an asshole would go ahead and want to see their president fail? Because if the president fails, the country fails.
Yeah.
And if the country fails, that means we all fail. And I got a lot of blowback. You find the same thing when you say things like that?
Yeah, I think that I say that quite often. That I think we should be rooting for the success. I think, as you're right, it's not about Trump. It's about the office of the presidency. I think we should be rooting for the success of the office of the presidency. And I've gotten pushback for that before, and I just think that's mainly because people are still it's still very new, it's still very raw, and like people are still very upset about the election. And it's kind of like, just saying anything that, like saying success and Trump in the same sentence can be upsetting for people, because nobody wants Trump to be successful in his own capacity. But now he's not in his own capacity. He's in the presidential capacity. He's in a public capacity. So, I think as we move on, people will kind of put their feelings aside and say, yeah, I hope that Trump is successful, in the sense that it's not hoping that Trump himself is great. It's hoping that the presidency is great and the country gets better. But yeah, no, I've had similar pushback for
and
sure.
And then they turn around like, wait, you were such an ardent critic against Trump, as you are, Harry, and very prolific on all of social media. How could you possibly wish good for him? And I turn around and I say to him, are you kidding me? How could you wish bad for your president? Would you want half the country to wish, if Kamala Harris had won, that she fails? Right? I mean, that just makes no sense to me. But I want to touch on something that you brought up, because most, if not all, of the Trump nominees have very strong MAGA ties with, as you said, insanely limited experience in the office that they're nominated for. There's one guy who just got nominated as Secretary of the Navy. His name is John Phelan. I know John for 20 years. I know John and his wife for 20 years. John's never been in the Navy. He's not a military guy. He's a hedge fund guy and very successful. God. So how he ended up getting Secretary of the Navy, why he would even want, I know he likes boats and shit, but his yacht does not make you a Navy man, right? I mean, I just don't understand. My question to you is, how do you think that this affects public trust in this upcoming administration? Yeah. I mean, I know it sounds like a rhetorical question, but how do you think?
No, I mean, for sure. I think it's obvious that if the people cannot trust the nominees, they look at their experience and can't say, I'm comfortable with this person running this agency or this group of people. That definitely hurts public trust. We, the people, should be able to say, the best of the best are in these roles, which these roles should have the best of the best. We should be able to feel comfortable in that and not have to wake up and be like, on January 20th, wonder if Pete Hegseth will know anything about the Department of Defense, will know his way around the goddamn building, right? It's incumbent that whenever somebody's elected, the people that they're putting in are qualified. And Trump has just completely ignored that, completely just said, hey, you have this, you have this, you have this. It's almost like they got together in a room and they put a bunch of secretary positions in a hat, and they all just like took turns taking a position out, and whatever one they picked, they got. It almost just feels like that. So I think that there will be a trust problem until these people can prove themselves. But as you mentioned, if they can prove themselves, then great. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Right. I mean, let me just use again John, since I know him again for 20 years. He's wickedly
Mm,
bright, and wickedly successful. I mean, he ran Michael Dell's money for years, wickedly successful and wickedly bright. Do I think that he could ultimately do great as Secretary of the Navy? What's the learning curve?
yeah.
That's the question that I want. There's no doubt if you put him into the role, he will do everything. He will study this position in order to do great, in order to understand the role. My only question is what's the learning curve? And right now, how fragile the country is, how fragile the world is. Do we actually have the time for them to learn on the job?
Mm.
Linda McMahon, let me not use John, not nice, because again, I know him for so long and I happen to like him. You know, he's wickedly bright. My question, take Linda McMahon. What's her background? Does she have a master's in education? Does she understand the administration of education? Or is she simply going to say, hey, I have children. I know about education. You know, I put my kids through school and so on. Well, you really didn't. They were taught by teachers. But what do you know about the administration of education, considering that's where the future of this country lies, in the children, right? In the, you know, all the way from nursery school through graduate school. So where does she fall on this? And what's the learning curve? Are we going to have 4 years of a learning curve, right? And then you have 4 years where kids, instead of studying reading, writing, and arithmetic, they're going to be studying, say, I don't know, basket weaving,
The
battleship,
Chronicles of
and
MAGA.
right, exactly. I mean, what happens to these children?
Yeah. No, it's that's a scary thing because as you mentioned, the world is very on edge right now. We have war in Eastern Europe. We have war in the Middle East. We have China, flirting with invading Taiwan. We don't have time for people to, learn how to do the job and get a little bit accustomed to their roles. We need somebody who's ready to start day one on all of these different agencies, education, defense, health, whatever it might be. Need these folks to start day one. And that's another big concern that they just won't be ready. And as you mentioned, I think, with your, I won't speak bad about your friend. I won't say that. I won't speak bad about your friend who's now going to apparently run the Navy. But just generally the we can't, in a world that is so divided, in a world that there's so much conflict, we can't have, a learning curve of even like 6 months. It can't even be 3 months. Can't even be
I
a
don't think
month.
I don't think it could be a week. I don't
Can't
think
be a
it could
week.
be a week. And
Can't be a week.
remember, all of our adversaries are looking at these
Oh yeah.
choices, and they will know everything, because this is what Putin does. This is what Erdogan does. This is what Orban does. This is what Xi Jinping does. This is what Putin does. This is what Mohammed bin Salman did. They're going to turn around, take a look to see who these individuals are, and they're going to get profile analyses on each and every one of these people. They'll be like, well, he doesn't really know shit about this, right? Maybe this is now a time for us to move one of our battleships into this region. And then all of a sudden, everybody's scrambling. Hey, what the fuck to do? And you say to yourself, wait. But doesn't the secretary have that under control? And he's like, wait, the secretary's still trying to find his office because he's in the wrong floor, right? Let's be, I mean, come on, let's be serious about it. That's the
Yeah.
problem, that our adversaries are also interested in knowing who these people are and how they could use that to their benefit against us.
Yeah. You can bet that Putin, you can bet that Xi, you can bet that Kim Jong Un, you can bet that the Ayatollah in Iran are all sitting there kind of chuckling to themselves, looking at some of these Trump picks. They're saying, I'm going to have to deal with a Fox News host as the Department of Defense secretary. Really? Or I'm going to have to deal with Tulsi Gabbard as DNI secretary. Really? They're all kind of sitting there wondering how we in the United States got it so wrong and how they are benefiting from the ignorance, the incompetence of Trump and of a lot of these nominees. And that's not a comforting thought. That's not a comforting thought. And as you mentioned, like Putin, for example, is incredibly studied when it comes to this stuff. You can bet that
Mm-hmm.
he's also asking his KGB agents to get detailed profiles of all these people, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. People at the Kremlin right now are going through 8 years of Pete Hegseth on Fox News. They're scrubbing through every second of that footage to find weaknesses in this guy to take advantage of. And that's a scary thought. So
Yeah.
I agree. I agree.
Well, let me ask you this then. What do you think the consequences are going to be for, as an example, agencies like the DOJ or the EPA, which Trump has vowed to dismantle?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be massive. I think with the EPA to start, deregulation is going to fly. He did it his first term. He's probably going to do it his second term, where all these different fossil fuel companies will be allowed to pollute the air and the water more. And they'll be able to put out certain chemicals that now they can't because of the Biden-Harris administration and regulation they put in. Trump did this in the first term. He deregulated so they can put out more chemicals that have ties to brain disease, lung disease. I think that's going to be the case again if he just doesn't try to get rid of it altogether. And we have Lee Zeldin, the guy who's been appointed
Yeah.
to, and him, I know him. We live in New York. We're familiar with
Yep.
Lee Zeldin, lunatic. He has a 14% lifetime score on his national environmental scorecard because he consistently votes against pro-climate legislation. And I don't think having a big fossil fuel guy like him at the EPA is going to help. But at the Department of Justice, it's going to be a bloodbath. I think Trump is going to fire. Of course, he's going to fire everybody on Jack Smith's team. He's going to try to go after all the FBI agents, the DOJ lawyers who investigated him, held him accountable, or attempted to hold him accountable. But then once that's done, I think there's a decent possibility he and Pam Bondi, if she gets approved as Attorney General, will turn the DOJ against some of Trump's enemies. I think it's very possible that he tries to go after Merrick Garland or Jack Smith or just enemies generally. This is a guy who's seeking vengeance. He made that clear, and on the first speech he gave when he said he wants to run for president again, he said, "I am your retribution."
Yeah.
And I think that he'll try to use the DOJ as his retribution and come after people that are dissenters.
Yeah. Well, I'm not 100% sure that I buy that. I know that it is always a lot of campaign tough talk, and he knew that it sort of ginned up the mob, right? The MAGA
Yeah,
mob, and to
yeah,
get excited. There's so much that's going to be going on, and I don't think he actually wants to deal with that shit, to be honest with you. And I know him pretty well. I think he really does want in his mind to be considered a great president. So my hope is that he actually puts aside all of this bullshit, not listening to the people that are surrounding him, because a lot of them are fucking nut jobs, like Steve Miller, right? Or
God,
or Steve Bannon. I hope he stops listening to any of them. But before I jump into any of that stuff, my real question, and I'm puzzled by it. You brought up the fact that that take Lee Zeldin, climate change, and that they're going to allow dumping of fuel into the air, and they're going to pollute the water in the air, and so on. Right? We have had this conversation before, where I talk about Gen Z and millennials, Gen Z. You all understand that when we're long gone, you're going to be the ones basically having to deal with not just the way that we fucked up your future in terms of financially with a $37 trillion deficit, but we're going to leave you with polluted water. We're going to leave you with air that you could barely breathe, right? I don't understand how Gen Z, I don't understand how millennials in college campuses were walking around proudly wearing MAGA hats, knowing, and I'm not just talking, I'm speaking mostly for the guys, because I found more of the males than certainly females, though there were quite a few females, that were, MAGA supporters. But I don't understand what they were thinking and why they would vote against their own interests.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking. I think among 18 to 24, just Gen Z generally, Trump won men, lost women. I think women voted for Kamala Harris, and but in the single digits still, not double digits as we'd like it to be. Um, and I don't understand any woman that votes for Donald Trump. I don't understand any man that votes for Donald Trump. But my guess when it comes to men is there's a broader trend that's been going on social media, especially recently, where folks like Andrew Tate and some of the Republicans have jumped on people's insecurities, their dislikes about themselves, their dislikes about the world, and blamed it on everybody else. So Andrew Tate goes around and says, no, no, no. This young man who's just growing up doesn't know who he is yet. It's not your fault that you feel this way. It's society's fault. It's the woke liberals' fault. It's their fault, this fault. And that content has flooded young men's social media in recent years. I would say fundamentally altering their brains to think that this is the way that society should be, that alpha, quote unquote, alpha males are what's better for society. So I think a lot of it is social media and people harnessing people's emotions to push a political agenda. And I think that Trump did that by going on a lot of these people's podcasts saying, hey, I'm here with Aiden Ross or I'm here with X, Y, and Z, and they love me. And these people have been speaking to young men for years. So I think it was kind of like a trickle down effect from Aiden Ross is a big podcast. Trump goes on that podcast and people associate Trump with Aiden Ross and they vote for him. So it's a
Okay,
complex thing, I
wait.
think,
Hold
that's
on.
taking place.
I can't. I have a hard time buying that because I find your generation to be wickedly bright. You know,
Yeah.
the way that you consume information.
Yeah.
The your generation, every generation becomes smarter than the generation before them, except of course for our founding fathers. Who came up with this Constitution that managed to survive 249 years. Maybe, right? But I don't understand young women in colleges who understand doesn't I don't give a shit what podcast you go on or what podcast Trump went on. They overturned Roe versus Wade. Certain states now, you cannot get an abortion after 6 weeks. Most women don't even know they're pregnant until after 6 weeks. And yet you're going to lay down, assuming they're heterosexual, with a guy wearing a fucking MAGA hat. How does any of that make any sense to me at
It
all?
doesn't.
Right? And then you see these guys, they're broing each other I mean, they're in the fraternity, yeah, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. He created this movement. And I'm trying to find out from you, as somebody that is in that age group that's very connected to this Gen Z, group. How is it that he managed to infiltrate the brains of young men and women, even if he didn't get the bulk, right? Even though, like, say, Kamala Harris got 82% of all the women vote.
Mm.
Who are the 18%?
Yeah, it just doesn't make it just doesn't make any sense. I don't understand the woman aspect of it. I don't know how Trump managed to get a decent amount of young women to vote for him. With the men, as I mentioned, I think it's a lot of misinformation. I think it's a lot of social media, and I think it's a lot of preying on people's emotions. But it is disappointing as a young person to look at my fellow young people, my generation, and to see this kind of huge swing from Biden to Trump, almost double digits with young people. And I have no understanding of why. I have no understanding. It doesn't make any sense. So there's no good answer. There's no good answer for why this took place. I think we'll just have to keep looking at the data and maybe draw some form of conclusion to try to win these people
Have you
back.
been asked, by the way, by the DNC to get involved? Have they come to you and they ask, hey, we're actually now thinking about 2028, and as a very large social media presence, don't you think that they would be asking you to come on board? Hey, what did the Trump campaign do that managed to attract your generation, Gen Zs to millennials? What is it that you think that he did? And what can we do to either counter it or to advance our position, which really should be your position as Gen Zs, as millennials?
I've unfortunately I've not been approached. I've not been approached by the DNC. I would happily help in any capacity that I could with some of this stuff because there does need to be a change. And whatever Trump did, whatever his campaign did, especially when it came to social media, was unfortunately successful. I didn't even think it was going to be successful. I was looking at it from the beginning, and I was like, this doesn't seem like to be a winning strategy to me. But there are things to emulate there. There are things that we, the Democrats, can look at and put in our own way. But no, I've not been approached. I hope that the DNC and people in the Democratic Party, or even just campaigns generally, make this effort to reach out to content creators or independent media. I hope the DNC reaches out to you at MeidasTouch. I mean, you guys do such a fantastic job, but that's yet to be seen. We'll see.
I don't think they will. They ran. That's why I turned around and I said to you earlier in the show, what if hypothetically, by bringing in these billionaires, which is really what his cabinet is comprised of, whether it's the Secretary of the Treasury, right, who's a billionaire with a hedge fund, whether it's this guy Phelan, whether it's Linda McMahon. I mean, they're all a bunch of billionaires. Maybe because they're so non-traditional that it'll be a benefit, right? The same way that you turn around and you say his campaign was completely non-traditional, whereas the Democrats ran it by the same old fucking playbook, right? It's the same playbook over and over and over. And while she did great, I guess, for a 3-month run, they really should have, obviously. And again, hindsight being 2020, and I happen to be, a fan of Joe Biden's. Maybe either he should have stayed in all the way, or he should have gotten out earlier, given her a chance to put forth more of the platform. I don't know what she did wrong, assuming that she did something wrong, but we know that she did because she lost.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to figure out, what is it that Democrats need to do? Because Trump has changed the game. There is no playbook. His playbook gets written spontaneous, and they're running the same playbook, the Democrats. I think a major overhaul in the DNC is needed in order to really figure out what happens in 2 years from now and then 4 years.
Yeah, I think that's something I think about when it comes to 2028 with the candidate is Trump was very successful when it came to just like talking and being like open, right? Like you're right. He didn't follow any playbook. When he was in an interview, he didn't answer questions. He didn't talk about policy. He just went on rants and, went on podcasts and talked about cultural issues that really, have been in the news in recent years. He didn't follow any, political consultant's advice of answer the question in this way and give a policy proposal, solution, criticize your opponent, then move on. Or if you're approached with this, pivot. Whereas Kamala Harris and the Democrats did. There was a playbook of like, okay, this is how we answer questions. This is how we go about responding to this or that, whatever. So I think that the candidate in 2028, and by the way, Kamala Harris is not wrong for doing that. That is how politics has been. And that's how I think it should be, that people are prepared to answer questions and sound professional, but we're not in that era, I suppose. So in 2028, I think that whoever the candidate is should just be very much themselves. Just, go into interviews and be free and a little bit more like, relax when it comes to your answers and try to be personable, try to connect with people and things like that. Because we're not in an era of President Obama, Mitt Romney in 2012, where everything was very professional. They sound like real statesmen. We're in an era of Trump talking about Hannibal Lecter and boats sinking, So
yeah, I mean, look, you brought it up that misinformation played a massive, massive role in the election.
Yeah.
How do you think that we need to combat this misinformation, disinformation, malinformation platform that fucking works? It works. They turn around and they say, wait, hold on. You just said that we're going to institute a 25% tariff to start on Mexico and China, and 10% more than that on Mexico and Canada, and a 10% more than that on China. So I guess he's talking about 35%. Why not just say 35%? And then they ask him a question. President Trump, isn't that going to cause a recession? Isn't it going to be the consumer? They're bringing crime. They're bringing drugs, right? They're coming through the border, thousands at a time with fentanyl. They're killing our people. And he goes on and on. And, then he goes into the weave. It's like Hannibal Lecter said, and there's all this crazy talk, this misinformation. So the question and the funny thing is, how you're laughing, right? Young Gen Z, millennials, and so on, they were laughing too. And they found it funny.
Yeah.
It was almost like we became a reality show for a presidency, right? This became like a Kardashian reality show between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. What do we do to combat all this disinformation so that we can actually get into the heads of young people, or actually any voter, that they're not laughing at the silliness of the response, but at the end of the day, that's all that they remembered? It's almost like a bad jingle, like the Burger King jingle or the McDonald's jingle, right? It's a bad jingle, but it's all that you remember. And he's the best at it. Make no mistakes. He is the master of misinformation. He's the master of controlling a room.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I think a lot of people have been thinking about since the election, because you're right, the misinformation worked. Elon Musk pumping millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into spreading misinformation on Trump's behalf was effective. It worked. It swung the swing states to Donald Trump, and he won.
And today's episode is actually brought to you by Ollie. It's clean, fresh nutrition that your dog need in 5 flavors that they're going to absolutely flip over. I mean, you don't have to be a veterinary nutritionist to know that feeding your dog real, whole foods with minimal processing, it's one of the best choices that you can make for their health. A perfectly portioned, whole, fresh food diet has been proven to extend your pup's life by 2.5 years. You hear that? 2.5 years. And who doesn't want more time with their best friend? With absolutely no harmful fillers, no preservatives, Ollie, it's made in U.S. kitchens with ingredients carefully sourced from trusted growers and producers around the world. Because the time between Ollie's gentle cooking and your dog chowing down is minimal, they don't need preservatives to extend the shelf life. I mean, with 5 protein-first recipes like fresh beef with sweet potatoes, fresh turkey with blueberries, or fresh lamb with cranberries, you might start thinking, damn, my dog eats better than I do. And you know what? That's probably true when it comes to Ollie. So look, here's how it works. I told my neighbor, go out and you fill an Ollie's 30-second quiz, and then they'll create a customized meal plan that's based on your pup's weight, the activity level, and other health information. Ollie then crunches the numbers, and they recommend the right recipes and daily portions for your precious pup based on hundreds of thousands of real dog results. And get a load of this. For the first timers, Ollie will send out your pup's first box with 2 weeks worth of meals and a guide on how to gradually switch them over to their new diet. Ollie offers 3 meal plans to choose from, so that you can choose from between a full fresh plan, fresh topper plan, or a mixed plan with their freshly baked recipes for your special fur baby. I mean, they also have treats and supplements. I mean, you think that you're talking about a person. You're not. You're talking about your favorite animal. You're talking about your pup. Ollie's biggest sale of the year is here. So listen to this one. For a limited time, you get 70% off. 70% off your first box, plus a free bowl and a storage container. So head right now to Ollie.com, fill in your dog's details, and use code Cohen to get the lowest price of the year on a personalized meal plan. And this offer ends December 6th, so act now. Head over to Ollie, that's OLLIE.com, and enter code Cohen to get 70% off your first box. Again, you can get 70% off your first box, plus the free bowl and storage container. So head to Ollie.com, fill in your dog's details, and use code Cohen to get the lowest price of the year on the personalized meal plan for your pup. Go now.
So how do we, the Democrats, combat it? Well, I think that we as a country have to still promote listening to journalists and people who are reliable outlets, not outlets that just tell us what we want to hear. Continue to listen to fact checking, read fact checking, and things like that. But that might just be too much to expect. So what the Democrats do is we have to counteract it. And one of the ways that they were so successful at spreading misinformation is not just because Trump said it at a rally. That's just the origin point. What happened with the video is that it's spread everywhere on social media because the Republicans have this huge apparatus that funds campaign accounts, content creators, and more. They're able to disperse these videos to millions upon millions of people within a day. So what we, the Democrats, have to do is stop, in my view, stop just looking at traditional media as the only form of media and the only form to get our message out. Let's invest in content creators. Let's invest in independent media. Let's invest in people who are doing this every single day of their lives, who are reliable people, who are good faith, and have them have the ability to send those videos out to millions. If we could have an army of content creators like they do on the right, because they have an army, and they have studios, they have the equipment to do so, they have the following to do so, we could get our message out just as effective to just as many people, if not more. And at the end of the day, our policy resonates better. So if we have, a video of the next candidate talking about reproductive rights, and you put that side by side against like JD Vance, for example, and we're able to get as many eyeballs seeing that, I think we'll be very effective. But that has to come with like a rethinking of the way that politics works, a rethinking of the way that PACs works, a rethinking of where this funding should go. That's my view.
I tried to reach out to the Harris campaign in several different ways. I spoke to somebody that was involved earlier with the Biden campaign before he stepped away. I tried to do it when he was involved with the Biden campaign and Biden was still the nominee. I turned around and I said, let me tell you how Trump used to do it in 2016 when he was effective. Every single morning before 7 a.m., a paper went out to thousands of people. His surrogates is how they were described. Talking points. It was the Trump campaign talking points memo. And it would turn around and say, today, all we want you to do is keep using the words, whatever they may be. Say, Mexicans are murderers, rapists, drugs dealers, that they're infiltrating our country by the thousands, and keep promoting that to anybody that's doing any television, any radio, any podcasts, anything. Use the same language. And that's what they did. In fact, even if you notice during my House Oversight Committee hearing, all the Republicans used the exact same language. And every single one of them had something to say about me. They all use the same language. So anybody that's watching it, whether you watch the full 9 hours of it or you watched only 15 minutes of it, which would have given you two or either one or two Republicans speaking, you heard the same words over and over and over. And that's very Stalin-esque, right? The more that you repeat something, even if it's a lie, the more that lie becomes the truth. And when he goes ahead and just constantly refer to Joe Biden as Crooked Joe, every single person that goes on Fox is calling him Crooked Joe. Crazy Kamala, just keep calling her crazy. Low IQ, keep using those terms. That's what they did. They managed to sink into the brains of whether it's Gen Zers all the way to out the cockers like me, right? They got into everybody's head with the same, and you're right, they dispensed, the same language, they dispersed it and through their massive conduit, and they ultimately changed the conversation.
It's messaging discipline. It's messaging discipline. And you're right, it's Stalin-esque in the way that they do it. But we the Democrats as well should be able to follow that messaging. We should be able to have like tested ready names or things to, associate with Donald Trump, tested and ready policy, and just like shoot it out to people. And man, that's such an interesting revelation you provided there, that every morning they'd have like a talking point
Mhm.
sheet. That's fascinating. That's some,
Do you know?
see,
You think? Wait,
oh,
I'm so
sorry.
sorry. You think that that's fascinating? How about the fact that I couldn't get that information to the Harris campaign? Imagine how fucking dumb that is. That you have somebody that was there on the inside that knows what they're doing every single day, knows what they're doing, and I couldn't reach a single person to get that information into the hands of somebody so that we pivot, and that instead of going by the old playbook, rather you now go ahead and you morph into something that is combative to get your message out.
Mm. That's crazy. That's crazy that that's that's crazy that they wouldn't adopt that or at least listen to you, regarding that. I don't. I mean, I won't ask like who you talked to at the Harris campaign because obviously we don't want to put anybody on blast. But that's annoying. That's kind of like frustrating, I think, for a lot of people and me as well. That somebody on the inside, somebody that's seeing like successful tactics work and not to adopt it or at least listen. When something's successful, even if it's done by somebody we hate, we should be willing to at least adopt it if it's needed. That's crazy. That's just crazy.
I think so. Let me ask you this question because you have a massive social media presence. How do you see platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky Now, X?
Yeah.
How do you see these platforms influencing political discourse during Trump's second term?
Oh, it's only going to become more influential. I've been on TikTok primarily since 2020, and I started in 2020 when I was 17. And the way that political conversation and political dialogue on TikTok has evolved from then till now is mind blowing. It's a totally different uh, arena than it was in 2020. So if that and it's acquired millions of dollars of funding, people have recognized how important it is. So if it's able to evolve that much in just 4 years in an increasingly new media landscape, I think that in the next 2, in the next 4, it's still going to evolve. It's still going to be vastly different, but it's also going to become not just TikTok, but all platforms, more and more and more of America's daily news consumption, new daily political consumption. So it's only going to become more influential. It's continued on that path. And this is why right now, I hope that folks at the Democratic Party, at the DNC, and at these upcoming campaigns are thinking about how they can best utilize this stuff. Not just having said congressperson or said candidate on the platform, but actually engage with the platform to have a more successful election outcome. And we need to be thinking about that right now because Trump and the Republicans are doing it. They're thinking about it. I hope that we're catching up as well, at least.
So, as you continue with your large social media presence and so on, how do you anticipate holding Trump's administration either accountable or providing accolades for something that may go may go right? Like I said, if hypothetically, going right back to my previous example, if something like comes great out of any one of these secretaries, these nominees that one would turn around and say on paper that they don't fit the previous mold, something comes out great. I'm going to be the first one to turn around and to say, I was wrong. By the way, I can't believe Pete Hegseth did something that nobody has ever done before. And boy, has it turned out to be favorable to America. And I'll give him a round of applause and I'll clap for him for an hour. But if hypothetically he goes to do something and let's just say it's not good for America, in fact, it hurts us, I'm going to then talk about that too, holding him and the administration accountable. How do you see your role in dealing with that? And in fact, how would you do it?
Yeah. So if I agree with you. So first and foremost, my thinking with all of this stuff is we have to be accurate. Like accuracy and being factual in politics is so important right now, because as we were just talking about, the misinformation is it's rampant all over American media, whether it be social media or traditional or not. So we have to be accurate, and we have to have valid criticism of Donald Trump. Like, you will not on my page for the next 4 years just come to my page and see me knocking Donald Trump for no reason. I'm not just going to say, well, I hate Trump just because he's Trump and he's president today, which means everything sucks. If he does something bad, or Pete Hegseth does something bad, or Tulsi Gabbard, whoever gets appointed does something bad, then it's the time to be vocal. But I don't think it's helpful for political discourse to just be like, oh, well, Trump's, as I mentioned, Trump's president, it's automatically bad. So that's my thinking of in terms of actually criticizing things that are worthwhile of criticism. And I agree with what you said, the sentiment. If something is good, if something good happens as a result of the administration, I have no problem acknowledging that something good happened, right? I think we as Democrats, we as Americans are able to just say, even if I disagree with this person, they did something that helps us. I don't think the Republicans are all that capable of that. Biden did so many amazing things. Harris did so many amazing things. They couldn't even come to terms with that. And they themselves say, hey, I think investing in infrastructure is good. But if Trump invests in infrastructure, we, the Democrats, will say, that's great, fantastic, wonderful. So that's kind of the way I'm thinking about it, that I'm not going to be so partisan to the point where I can't celebrate good things, but I'm going to be there criticizing Trump when it's certainly justified.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, on this podcast, on Political Beatdown, on my YouTube channel, The Michael Cohen Show, do you know how many times that I would turn around and say, you can't discount the fact that under Trump's administration, the vaccination for COVID was created, Operation Warp Speed. And we cannot take that away from him. But let me couch that by saying, despite the fact under his administration, under warp speed circumstances, they came out with the vaccination, he refused to take it. In fact, they told people not to take it. So the criticism is not in the fact that they were successful in creating at warp speed this vaccination, but the fact that he, unlike President Bush, Obama, and Clinton, and Joe Biden, refused to go ahead and show on television that they were getting the COVID vaccination. To the contrary, they said, don't do it. And now, of course, he has a vax denier who's going to be running Health and Human Services, which, again, to me, I just don't understand this. I don't understand the whole thing.
It's so baffling. It's just crazy.
Yeah. So can we go back for a second and talk about, Trump's focus on law and order, these policies that he puts forth? Now, I'm not 100%, I'm not against it. And nor am I against securing our borders. I said to Trump going back many, many years, starting in 2015, right, when we were talking about the initial launch of the campaign, we were talking about borders. And I said to him, a country without borders, quite frankly, isn't a country. And he turned around and he's adopted that statement. But what he's done is he has taken an issue, and it is a real issue. It's a popularist issue. And he's exploded it. He has now focused it on migrants. And you see the danger that comes out of that sort of attack on individual groups. It's very reminiscent of the 1930s, right? With Germany, where, you have to find the enemy. Well, the enemy here are migrants. And then you have people making up shit, which, again, just exploded about the Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, eating your cats, dogs, and the geese in the local pond. But I want to go back to this focus on law and order policies. It's really sparked a lot of concerns about increased surveillance and policing. What's your perspective on these measures?
Well, first of all, I always find it funny when Trump and the Republicans talk about law and order. They say that they're the law and order party because, the guy that they elected is going to be the next president of the United States is a convicted felon, is somebody who broke the law very flagrantly. So I just always find it funny when they talk about law and order and preserving the law when they actually don't care about preserving the law, in my view. But yeah, no, I mean, Trump has always been very, there's a balance, right, of like being pro police and pro freedom. He's always, or pro policing, pro things like that. He always tips the scale in favor of pro policing as opposed to protecting people's freedoms. I don't think that's going to be any different in his second administration. I think that's why I think it's very much so. He's going to use the Department of Justice to his benefit, that he's going to just ignore people's rights, and he's going to try to push the Attorney General to indict somebody, even if there's not enough evidence and even if they're not provided due process and things like that. I think he's going to go about doing all of that. I think he's
Well,
going
he
to go
did
about
that
it
to
doing it with his
me.
enemies. And he did
He's
that with
already done
you.
that to me.
Right, exactly. So I see that no different. I don't think he's going to do. I think his philosophy is very clear here, that arrest first and then think about rights second, and police first and then think about rights second. I think that's just the practice that he and his administration are going to put in.
Yeah, but the danger there is as well that you're now going to isolate other individuals, right? So if hypothetically you know that he's coming after you, let's use the immigrants, the migrants, where the very first bill that they're going to put forth, understand, he's coming to the White House with at least 24 executive orders.
Oh yeah.
Not prepared by him, by the way.
Yeah.
Prepared by the Heritage Foundation, the same folks that created Project 2025. He's coming with at least 24 of these executive orders, with the first one that he intends on putting forth is going to be the immigration bill. And they're going to want to do that mass deportation now, which was a campaign promise. They had their placards made during these campaigns, and they are intending, or at least the policy, is to round up 10 million immigrants, who they say should not be in this country. Some of whom were actually brought to this country when they were like 1 year old or less. This is the only country they know. They're now married with children. They have homes, they have cars, they have bank accounts, they work, they pay taxes. Doesn't matter. Not in his world. And again, what do? As each and every one of the surrogates start talking about it, they use the same language. Illegals, migrants, deportation, mass deportation now, internment camps. They all use the same language.
Yeah. It's, again, messaging discipline. We talked about that before. It's messaging discipline. I don't think that people are ready. Your average American, I know that a lot of your listeners are very politically informed. They know it's exactly what's about to happen. But I think for a vast majority of Americans, they're not ready for what's actually about to take place. They're not ready for these executive orders that are going to go in, the attempt to mass deport, and the effects that'll have on them, their families, and their loved ones. I talk to Republicans. I do debates all the time, debating mag all the time. And I talk to people all the time, and they say, yeah, my friend's undocumented, but they're a good guy. They're working a job, and like they're a buddy of mine, and I really appreciate them. Or my friends, on DACA, and they're a dreamer and they're protected right now. Trump's not coming after that. And I have to very soberly inform them that none of these folks are safe, that their lives very well, and the lives of their loved ones and the lives of their friends, could get turned upside down like that under Trump's second administration. Folks who are on DACA, Trump tried to end DACA once. So if you're a Republican out there, your friend's on DACA, you got a bigger problem. If you're out there and your friend's working with you at a job at in a kitchen or wherever you might be working, Trump is coming after those people. Tom Homan is coming after those people. So I really just don't think people have really started to appreciate the danger and the damage that Donald Trump is planning to do on day one. I hope he doesn't. My expectation, or my hope for the Trump administration, is that it's not as bad as we think it's going to be. But I cautiously have that hope.
See, what I know, based upon my knowledge of Trump for so many years, is the first thing that this group is going to do, because they need the wins. It's all about, it's a scorecard, winning versus losing. His platform about mass deportation, I think the 10 million number is an unrealistic number, but it's a goal. Imagine if he ends up getting million in the first 6 months. He'll be standing, or sitting at the Lincoln desk, right? And he'll be my fellow Americans, I made a promise to you that I was going to clean this whole crap up, right? And I did. I told you what I was doing. We went after illegal immigrants that are causing crime, bringing in drugs, they're murdering our people. He will have the win that he's looking for. And how do you expect that he's going to do it? They already know where a bunch of the migrants are. They're in hotels, like here in the city. And now there's going to be fighting between, say, New York, California, and the federal government. It doesn't take into consideration so many things, like New York being a net positive state and California as a net positive state, say, like, as opposed to Alabama, which is a net negative state, meaning that we pay more to the federal government than we take. So their threats against New York are limited, but it's going to become a fight between the federal government and our governor, or the governor of California. This is really dangerous. It's really dangerous. And they will start rounding up folk that are in the hotel. I call them the low-hanging fruit, putting them on buses, having them filmed, doing commercials on them, because one thing you got to give the Republicans credit for, they know how to raise money. From the poorest of Americans, they still manage to get money, whether it's a $100,000 watch, to a $15,000 guitar, to a $500 pair of sneakers. It doesn't make a difference. To a $99 NFT, it doesn't matter. They've managed to figure that out, and that's what they're going to do. And they're going to show the mass deportations so that he could have a win. It's all about winning.
Oh yeah. No, it's all about the ego boost. It's all about the winning. It's all about the optics. So Donald Trump can come out and say, "Hey, I did this. It's great." But I really think it's going to backfire if Trump tries to do something like that. I really, really think so. Even if he does 1 million in the first 6 months, whatever the number might be, undocumented migrants make up 5% of America's workforce. They make up significant portions of industries like construction, like farming, things like that. If Trump wants to deport all these people, then he's going to have to explain to the American people how everything becomes more expensive, how houses are not being built at the same rate and housing prices go up dramatically as they are expected to do, and what he's going to do about it. And I know he can have his parade, but I think that people at the end of the day will feel it, will see it. And I know you and so many people are going to be blasting these numbers out every single day to hold him accountable if he decides to go through with this asinine plan,
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Listen, the hour goes by quickly here, mea culpa. So let me use this as the last question. How do you plan on bringing Gen Z to the table to understand those policies which are negative to America? And we can say they're negative. Trump will say that they're positive. The ultimate answer to that will be the facts.
Yeah.
When you are paying $20 for an avocado, right, because of tariffs, when you're paying $25 for one piece of wood instead of $12 as a result, then we'll be able to use those numbers. How do you expect to go ahead and try to reach Gen Z, so that they fully understand which side is right and which side is wrong?
I'm just going to continue through all the avenues I've done so far and hopefully get more people into the mix. I think what we need is just more people making their voices heard, more people spreading the message. So for the next 4 years, for the short term, I'm going to be hoping that some of these donors, these PACs realize that there's a lot of value in creators, and like investing in creators is a really good thing and you can get your message out. But I'm also going to be trying to encourage people to join the fold and get involved and start spreading that message. Because I'm only one person, you're only one person. You and I can scream from the rooftops all day about how Trump is so terrible, but we need a lot of people doing that. We need a lot of people talking to their specific communities, their loved ones, their followings on social media about how Trump is dangerous and the facts and the numbers around this stuff. And hopefully we'll have a breakthrough there.
Yeah, the interesting thing too is that Republicans have this massive group of billionaires that are just funding all of this.
Yeah.
Democrats, everybody's trying to do it on their own. So yeah, while you and I and so many others, Ben and MeidasTouch, we yell from the rooftops, keep your eye on this, keep your eye on this, keep your eye on this. We don't have the same support that they have. We don't have the Elon Musks, the Peter Thiels. We don't have the Schwarzmans. We don't have the Lutnicks. We just don't have them. And we
No.
do have them. They're just not engaged. They're doing it
Well, they
all
don't
on their
see
own.
they don't
We
see the
do it all on
value
their
yet.
own.
A lot of these wealthy donors don't see the value yet in creators, in independent media. The Republicans have. They see the
Yep.
value. They're using it right now. Like every single day, they're going to continue investing in it. People like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro, folks like that, they're getting their shows supported and invested in by the Republicans. MeidasTouch, to my knowledge, is not getting support
No,
from the Democratic Party. You know what I
we
mean?
do
It's not
not.
getting support from these PACs or anything like that. And I think that if we could work together, content creators could work with PACs and work with donors in a way that's really effective and a way that is good faith and focused on the facts, that so much can be achieved. So much can be achieved. So I'm going to be, hopefully, maybe I'll just be screaming for the rooftops for the next 4 years, but I'm going to hopefully be screaming to these folks that invest in independent media, invest in MeidasTouch, invest in people like that,
Yep. Well, Harry, thank you so much for joining me on Mea Culpa. Got to have you back because there's going to be so much going on over the next 4 years that I can assure you. So thank you, brother.
Thank you, man.